What's going on, everybody? It's been a while. I got a backlog of content to work through, and tonight we're going to be looking at a match to 10 with Bartender and Blobfish. And I haven't had the chance to cast Bartender yet, and I've really wanted to. And so I'm really excited to kind of showcase this to you guys. And I got Reborn, one of my Glorp University attendees, kind of helping me out, and we're going to be commenting on and looking at this duel as it happens, is just noting all the interesting moves and techniques that these two use, because these are two very dynamic players, and Blobfish specifically asked me to cast it because it would probably be pretty fun to watch, so he kind of showcased his techs in an effort to make it entertaining for an audience, and so let's get it going.
Begin.
Alright, we're gonna go full screen. We have a lot of camera action from Bartender.
The force is
Oh my
with
I think he's
goodness.
trying. I feel like he's trying to go for a drag here with a lot of yellow. But
Oh yeah, big time.
Blob just got a big blue, I think, dragon. That's
Yep.
what it looks like.
Yep. It's a lot of camera action. It's very fast paced. It's hard to comment right now on specific instances that happen because there's so much action in the duel. I mean, there's typically a lot less action in duels, but these two are just like W keying and like going at each other pretty aggressively. So the pace is like really high compared to other matches that I've casted before. Nice yellow by
Yeah.
Bartender. Sweeps for Blob.
Yeah, Blob is trying to go for a lot of horizontal yellows,
Yep.
but he switched to a red and caught him on that low swing as Bartender was trying to go for an overhead, it seemed.
Yep. So Bartender left himself open with the overhead, and then Blob raced him for a red right and was able to get him. So it's those little tiny micro decisions that are making the difference in these, and we're going to see a lot of that as it keeps going on. Opening up with red from Bartender. And we see a really dynamic package from these two. It's really a lot of different techniques constantly. And I think Bartender just did quite a bit of damage right there with a red and then a yellow.
That's what it
Very
looked like,
aggressive
yeah.
sweeps.
And he's trying to poke with blue, and now he's switched to yellow and back to blue again.
Yep. He tends to switch up his stance very frequently and dynamically. And so within the span of 5 seconds from Bartender, you might see blue, yellow, and red in all different tech variations, high, low, left, right. A lot of his strategy, at least here, seems to be based on overwhelming with different tech variation, whereas Blob is taking a more classic approach to dueling and just using some kind of more time-honored techniques.
begin.
Yeah.
Another opening red from Bartender. It's the second time he's done that. Triple red from Blob and some camera action where he tried to aim it up to extend the range. A diagonal blue sweep from Bartender. That's a vanity move. There's not really a lot of like that right there. There's
Yeah.
not a lot of purpose for it. It's more of just playing around, I
Blob's
guess.
Blob trying to come in with those yellows against what looks to be Bartender's moves.
Mm-hmm.
Because he just basically chased him down and chopped him up.
Yeah, Bartender. Yeah, he kind of cleaned up Blob
Does.
that time.
Yeah.
Begin.
Let's see if let's see if Bartender opens with the red again. And he does! He's open
Yeah.
with red every single time. And he took 100 health right there with a red combo. Really close distance. So Blob is trying to space out a little bit more, and Bartender is doing more of the W keying, where he's constantly coming forward and trying to poke and prod with different stances from just about every angle immediately in front of Blob, keeping his camera on him the entire time.
Yeah, Bartender seems to be doing a lot of what's chasing, so he's not allowing kind of, because I think what Blob's trying to do almost in a way is get some distance, poke in again, and then run away, trying to do these kind of hit and run tactics, whereas and Bartender's trying to play with him now, but beforehand with his chasing, it's not letting Glorp kind of get those hit and runs in.
Yeah, it's just a constant flurry of move after move after move. Oh, I think I paused it there. Yep.
Begin.
Let's see if he opens up with the red again. Perfect score, 3-1. Nope, he didn't open with red this time, so he's varying it up a little bit.
Yep.
Oh, wow!
And that cost him there, yeah.
I want to go back and see that. Oops, how do I do frame skip in this one? Oh, there we go. I know how to use this, I swear. Okay. So we go red right.
Although he's in yellow now.
Oh,
yeah,
he's using
red
yellow right. I'm sorry. Looks
yeah,
like red right.
and then it looks like a really weird sweep red left almost. I can't tell if that is.
That's a good guess, but really what happened right here is he came off a parry. So what Blob likes to do a lot is anticipate when the saber is going to hit his saber and go for a parry punish. And so that's what happened here is their sabers collided right here.
Right.
And then Blob gets a favor
30 damage, more or less, 25.
Yeah.
Right now.
And Blob gets a favorable angle. And then, so Bartender's stuck in this crouching, and crouching limits your mobility. Blob is standing, so Blob actually moves around, and if we skip more, we're going to see the punish.
Yep,
and I believe that was, it's hard to tell if that's red or yellow. I believe, based on how slow it's going, it might be red, but let's go back and take another look.
I'm just kind of assuming based on damage, because he goes from 38 to 0, so it would not, the yellow swings tend to do 30, right?
Yeah, yellow swings tend to do 30, but there's the chance it might have ticked twice. But yeah, it did look like red.
Looked like a red low right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, red low rights tend to have a lot of exposure. I tend to not favor those moves as much, but there are a couple players that can pull them off, and they are very situational. If you have these players that have just about every single move in their bag, then you're going to see that eventually whenever it's appropriate. So Blob has got every single move and technique you can probably think of in the bag. He's a very technical player.
There's some argument over there was some argument over the kills, but it's 4-4-2.
Yep. That was it took a minute to figure that out. Base Reborn counting skills. 30 hit for Blob. Hit in between on the red from Bartender. And a lot of that small side-to-side action from Bartender that we don't usually see. We usually see longer semicircle movements from classic NF non-force duelists, but Bartender doesn't come from a traditional background. He comes from a force fighting background. That was his principal gameplay before he switched over to non-force, to saber only. And so we see some of that come alive in his tracking, in his camera motion, and in his... Yeah.
You want your crosshair to be on your opponent for the force powers most of the time.
Mm-hmm. And that's why whenever I jump over Bartender, usually a lot of other duelists, a lot of other duelists, they don't camera track me when I'm jumping over them, but Bartender does. He has a lot of specialization that classic duelists don't typically have.
Yeah, it's interesting seeing, like, having fought him as well, at least as part of them. He's using a lot more direct movements here. He does tend to, like, jump around a lot as well.
Yep. Cleaned up with blue. And Bartender really goes for the kill. If he has the impression that you got low HP, he's gonna really, like, stress you out with blue and, like, not play any games, try to finish you off quick.
Yeah, he'll chase. He'll definitely chase. He's trying to do a little bit of poking here with blue.
Yellow.
Switching to... But back to blue. Like, he switches to yellow just for a second, almost, I think, to throw Blob off. And then he switches back to blue.
Wow, that did a lot. I would need to go back and see that. That was a crazy amount of damage. I'm not sure if it was the mod, because he's at 122, okay? So he comes in, frame, And then Blob is in blue. He parries. He knows he's going to parry, so he moves out. Because Bartender traded favorably that time. So right swing. Idle Saber from Bartender comes in. Yellow right. So they're trying to play around with each other.
That looks to be I think Blob's in red here, although it might be just a slower. But
that's a yellow. Yep.
Oh, that's yellow?
Yeah, because you're looking at 122.
Right.
It goes to 92.
92, that's yellow. It's just because of the slowdown that it looks like a... Then he immediately drags it back, it seems.
Yep.
Drags yellow, horizontal sweeps, front and back.
62, yep, that's right.
And then...
I think there was one more hit, because I think he fell to lower HP, though I could be mistaken. And then...
I think the last two hits happen within the... So... Looks to be a... That's red, I think. That's a red vertical here.
I think it's red horizontal. Because it's coming across his body. Yeah. Yeah, you see it. Whenever it's rearing up like a baseball bat right there, it looks like to be a red right diagonal.
Mm-hmm.
And
so it's most likely a red diagonal then.
Yeah, and it's an interesting choice because red right diagonals, they have a little bit of slower speed. But then yellow rights are not as quick as yellow lefts. And I think that's just one of those subliminal things where he said, okay, well, the angle for this swing is going to work out, so let's bet it on a red right diagonal. And then he's positioned right now to gear that up so it at least causes a parry, but if not, maybe even get a punish.
It's also because I think he can tell that Bart's in yellow, so he's coming in with that red because it'll counter, and then that hit comes in, hits him for 60.
Yeah, and here's another thing too, is if he has shields and we can't see Blob's HP right now, that means he knows Bartender was low and he was willing to trade damage with the exposure that you typically get on diagonals. And so even if he hits him with one or two yellows, that's still not going to make a difference because he's going to trade the damage favorably and get Bartender's HP down to 0.
Right, and I think there's just a tracking. No, here comes another. This is a red horizontal right. I think.
Let's see.
I'm assuming.
I think it's an overhead. No, you're right. Yep. It looked to be a parry. I think it was one of those weird parry hits, or he switched into blue and got a little blue hit off of a red parry.
Potentially, yeah.
It was so quick, it's hard to tell.
Yeah. He
does like to switch a lot on the parries. These are two players that try to trick you constantly. And especially, what adds another wrinkle to this is that Blob and Bartender duel each other. They've dueled each other thousands of times. They're well aware of what each other's techniques are. Oh, good lunge. That was so fast and
punished him hard.
Yeah.
Bartender punished him hard after that lunge with a bunch of blues.
Yep. That's a risk with lunge. It can do damage, but it leaves you very exposed.
Yeah. I tend to find, and I might be, using lunge a bit, perhaps wrong, but I find because lunge also has a tendency to deflect, right?
Yes.
You can use it if you're anticipating your opponent to potentially negate their attack and cause a deflect or a parry in their case.
Yes, and like you saw a mad deflect right there off of the lunge and the blob, exactly what you were just referring to. And Bartender is looking to clean up. Yep.
Yeah, Bartender's being very aggressive.
Yep. He's usually quite aggressive. Just always coming at you forward, trying to pressure you from all different ways and angles and whatnot. And the problem is that Bartender, he's a really smart guy, and he knows how Blob is going to react to him stressing him out, so that enables him to add almost like an extra layer of intelligence on top of his aggression. If he's so familiar with the way a player moves and behaves, then that adds to the effectiveness of how aggressive he's being, in a way that probably wouldn't work on a more experienced other player that he doesn't duel quite as much.
Yeah.
Oh.
Blob's trying to poke, and it looks like Blob had the health advantage there for that trade.
It was a trade, but it was also Bartender being aggressive. Blob finally said, all right, I had enough. And then he just baits him in with a juicy overhead red. which is a
Yeah.
super exposed move, and then bartender comes in being aggressive as hell. But the tendency to chase was so high that he fell for it. So let's get back to the overhead. It always skips me back too far. It's because I
Right. So here's coming in with a red overhead, and he's transitioning into a red diagonal.
no, he did a
Okay.
left. I believe it was a let's see.
Left red.
Yeah, so the angle, that's a
Mhm.
red upper left. So he's doing the combo I like to do a lot, which is red upper left into a forward. And the purpose in doing that a lot of the time is because red upper left is such an exposed, juicy move that a good duelist sees that and goes, aha, I'm going for it. And that's part of the intent here with Blob. And he likes to angle his red hits away, draw you in, so he's going the other way. So you're not going to parry it, but then he comes right back around with rapid speed, and his saber is on the path to the active window much faster than bartender's is. So that red is going to break through. It lured bartender in, and now the red's going to drop like a hammer and get bartender, and that's exactly what
Right.
happened. So he didn't even get a chance to tick. Yeah.
Yeah. Also with reds, at least with this mod, they tend to overheads tend to tick twice a lot because of the amount of time that they're spending in the hitbox. I've noticed. So they're going to be extremely powerful if you actually land them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, red overhead, that's in theory most of the time should be almost an automatic kill if you're like halfway through a duel. It's pretty much like
Yeah.
JK2's equivalent of a critical hit. Like it's just pretty much like you've done the most damaging move in the game if you can land that. And if you can trick people and make them fall into the right path and you do your planning appropriately, which Blob does a lot of, there it is again, right there. Same exact move.
Indeed, just from Blob's perspective, he's in red. Here I think he switched to yellow to bait with those. So he deflects here, it seems. Runs away.
Let's look at the
Doesn't
angles right here, though. Like, I almost never see this where you're right next to somebody and then your angle's completely away. So I think the intent might be here is that A, it's a very casual duel and they're not paying attention to their movement. There's one possibility. Or secondly, he's trying to angle a swing so that he gets a quick swing out and then coming back to drop the hammer with the overhead, which I think that might be the case. But let's see what happens here. Okay, he gets back around. And bartender was idle saber. He could have swung at Blob and just didn't. So there's.
I think he wasn't able to say it. If you go back a little bit, just a little bit, they recently had a deflect, which is why he was able to turn around. I'm pretty sure. They recently. So he might have been in that deflect animation where he can't, where he's still trying to get his hands on a saber, so to speak.
Yes.
And that's why he wasn't able to take advantage of that. Because right here you can see his model's trying to grab his saber.
I think, they're both in a deflect pattern. That's a good observation. Yeah.
And I think that's why Blob allowed himself to show his back, also because that would mean, like, you move forward, I guess, a little bit faster than you do backwards.
Yes.
So he's trying to put some distance between so he can turn around and come in for that trick again that he used previously.
And if you're in this position as well, and you're coming off a deflect, like, what would you do if you're in a duel, your saber got deflected, the guy's right by you? I mean, your options
put some
are...
distance between, put some distance between myself, roll away possibly,
Yep,
I think would be what I would do. But I almost think that's kind of what, the reason that Blob's not rolling away is because he knows that bartender will either A, fall, and he wants to capitalize on this moment.
Yep.
And he's also he knows that bartenders also can't do anything to him because he can see that he's also currently been in the deflect state.
Yeah, Blob has sensed that out. And as well with bartender, if you roll away from him, his chasing ability is probably the best in this entire game. And if you roll, he will close that distance faster than you're able, and I know this from personal experience, he'll close that distance faster than you're able to even like get your senses back together and figure it out. And so it looks like Blob chose to stay in close and kind of face his demons and just turn around and try to make the most out of it and keep the spacing tight instead of rolling away, instead of evading. Just flip the camera around and give it another go. And so we get to see how that pans out in the next frames. So it's a diagonal left upper yellow to get a good hit on bartender. Bartender looks like he yawed too hard, and
Yeah,
then
he's
yeah, he swung
he
his
only
camera too
tips him
much.
basically, and then he comes around. I think again, although I think he's transitioning into red right as the swing's happening. I'm not sure though.
So what's happening? That's a good guess. So what happened right here is he's actually transitioning into a stagger step, but that's a little bit too late to be using that technique. So that's essentially the left, yellow left, and then left plus up. And so that's
Yeah,
yellow left, and then he's setting up for left plus up. But the problem with that is if you try to do it in close quarters like this, you're going to get absolutely hammered by just about every other technique in the game. Because stagger step is something that, look at the entirety of his body is exposed, whereas blobfish is ready to do just about any sweep from this angle. And so I think we see a little bit of a punish there, and let's see what happens as the frames keep going. Yeah.
right here, Blob rolls away as bartender misses, and that's kind of, and here he's switching to red. Here, Blob is switching to red
There it
because
is.
I think he's putting that distance again to use that feint where he's running away. He's setting up for a swing.
Yep. And then come down with a hammer on the overhead. That's exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Actually, red left and then red.
And then a red vertical.
Yep. I want to watch that again because this is one of my favorite combinations in the game. I use it a lot. Red upper left, and he aims it to get
He
maybe a
aims it so
deflect.
that's what it looks like. He's covering himself as bartender's trying to come in with that blue,
Mm-hmm.
and he's taking that blue as he's swinging for that vertical. Bartender decided to try to trade here. It seems.
Yep.
He was trying to go for a health trade.
Yes. Well, and also bartender sees red, and he sees red being used so like what seems to be flippantly and up close, that the immediate thought in a lot of people's minds is, hey, I'm going to punish the red by going in with a quick blue. And that's a logical, good thought. But the problem is Blob knows how to use red upper left in such a way that it can deflect the blue, break the stance, and then come back in with the red overhead. And that's exactly what happens here. He likes to use red upper left. I like to use this as well to break parries, not necessarily always to do damage. If you can do damage with the red upper left, that's good. But the real benefit is that it smashes through just about any parries, and it's very quick. And it's not a very commonly used move either. So let's see.
Because here comes that red hammer.
Yep, exactly.
And bartender just can't get away.
Yep. If you're committed too forward for that blue sweep, it is so hard to get away. It's hard to resist the temptation, especially for an aggressive player like bartender, where you want to just punish and finish them off with blue and just W key into them. But the problem is if you have a player like Blob, he can just sit back and anticipate that, deflect with red, and then come down with the hammer. And we've seen that a couple times now. Gonna be
He's used
interested.
it back to back.
Yeah, back to back with the same technique. So bartender's either got to switch it up or wait for Blob to make a mistake.
Begin.
And right now it is favoring bartender. There's 2 yellow hits by bartender. Another yellow hit, so he's down at 110-ish.
Switching a lot to red to bait, it seems, and then he's switching back to blue to kind of, as Blob's trying to close in to get in between those red strikes.
Yep. It doesn't look like it's working right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of parries because I think Blob has been in yellow from what I'm understanding, and so because of the wider swings, and so a lot of bartenders getting deflected because he's trying to come in with blue.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, and we actually see what happens when we see a failed attempt on the red upper left right here. So here it is, winding up the baseball bat, coming in, running away, and covering up his exposure with a red upper left diagonal. Okay, hoping to get the parry. And then it just doesn't happen. I can't easily explain why. It just doesn't happen.
I think it's because of the trajectory of the blade and bartender also moving kind of, because he turns around basically and moves in a way that the blade would technically deflected to him.
Yes, he does move back a little bit, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's opening out some room here. So that blade is coming, like, because of the way the hitbox is in, it's really just a big rectangle. but it's still slightly facing forward from what I understand in JK2.
Yeah,
Him moving like that allowed him to move that hitbox out of the way and not get hit.
that's right. It was a sneaky little hit, so bartender did adjust, realizing that he just got killed twice by that move. Likely has gotten killed by it a lot in the past by Blob, and has figured out ways that can, at least some of the time, work out well. And if he's got a lot of HP, he's probably willing to take that chance. And so
Yeah.
that was a trade he was willing to do. And that was a fail that time. And a favorable trade for bartender. The bartender just melts his HP with those sweeps right there.
And then
He almost
switches to
tried it
red
again
and-
right there.
Yeah, he tried it, but bartender switched to red this time, and I
Mhm.
think that's where that because he's going in for that baseball again, but that red right just cuts through that anyway.
Yeah,
'Cause here it
that's,
is.
you know, I think that almost could have gone either way. This really comes down to like a tenth of a second because,
A lot of the times, yeah, especially with reds, because of the amount of damage they deal, it can be kind of like, even if you have 100 HP, the opponent can just absolutely melt you.
and it can be a bit of a damage race too. And the thing too is bartender comes in with a red right, which I think if you're this far behind on a red right and the diagonal is coming down like this, I think it's absolutely uncanny that Blob lost this exchange. It looks like, at least on paper, as I might say, Blob looks like he would win this exchange because the diagonal is about to hit the active window. And then bartender somehow, I think he flips his camera around and yaws pretty hard.
Basically, yeah, they clash, and it ends up kind of, because he still takes the hit.
Yeah,
He takes the hit basically right on the face, but because he's yawing, and then he kind of just uses that reverse animation to basically bring that blade right back into Blob.
yeah. And what happened right
Which,
here? Yep.
I've noticed that you can do that sometimes with red deflex as well. Is if somebody deflects your red, you can actually switch to the other side and
Yes.
continue and make an attack from there. And I think that's that's the technique that bartender used here is because he got deflected with the overhead with that diagonal that Blob hit, he was able to hit him slightly and then come right back while Blob was open.
Yep. That's exactly right. And we see a lot of where red can get really fascinating is, let's say you hit for a three combo or a triple red, and if you deflect your saber correctly, you can hit for a potentially fourth or even fifth swing on another angle that you couldn't get to prior because the deflect gave you that opportunity. But those are split second decisions, and bartender happened to adjust in time to get that red. Is that a red up? It's a red lower left technically, even though he was in red right, but the deflect gave him that opportunity, as you just pointed out. And then
Yep, and there it goes.
Yep, cool to see. I love seeing those red parries that just exchange favorably for one player in a really uncanny way and just absolutely mow people down. I'm a big fan of seeing those like Fast and Furious style duels. Six bartenders lead. Ooh, nice blue, nice yellow by Blob. Good technical in between swing hits.
Yep, and bartender tried to lunge that first time and he got punished.
Yep. This is looking to be a flaw almost for Blob. Yeah, that was the easy cleanup for Blob.
Mm-hmm.
8-7. Blob's looking a little bit more refined now. I think he was behind bartender's aggression a little bit early on.
Begin.
I think there's some confusion about the score. I remember there being.
Two of the smartest guys in this game, and they can't keep count. Pretty funny. That's why I made the scoreboards into my map, so I didn't have to deal with this anymore.
Bartender got a good poke in early with that yellow, but seems to be he's trying to. Blob's using a lot of the red aerials, the red right aerials, it looks like.
Yeah, he wasn't
I
doing
think-
that a lot before. I think he should have been doing that more often. And he has an excellent red. There it is again, that attempt on the red left into a red overhead, but he got punished that time because it seems like it's not working as effectively on bartender as it was earlier.
Right, and now they're kind of just trying to poke each other down with blue a lot, and bartender chases him to his death.
Yep. Bartender and Blob both like to use blue a lot. Blob especially, he likes to... He has an excellent yellow, and then he likes to open up and kind of bait for a blue parry, and then hoping to tick like 2 or 3 times to that open blue parry. He does that quite a lot, but bartender does too, so it's interesting to watch these two.
Yeah.
Red right. There's an example right there. He just tried reflecting a red right with a blue.
And he countered, the bartender tried to come in with a blue there, and he switched to yellow specifically to deflect those attempts at sweeping.
Yeah, he sees it. Bartender's being a little bit more methodical now in his movements. He's not spacing out quite as much. And then I told Garn to shut up for no reason. He just says, Jesus. I'm trying to focus on recording, Garn.
Yep.
It's still Bartender's game. I think he's up.
It's, pretty sure it was match point just there.
Yes.
So it's still match point here, but it's 9-8 bartender, yeah.
9-8. Bartender using cute blue sweeps. Those diagonal blue sweeps, they serve no purpose, and you can't convince me otherwise. No, they probably do, but I'm not a fan of them.
I almost feel like bartender's using them kind of as bait.
Yeah.
He's
That actually worked that time, though.
Yeah, he's trying to use he's baiting Blob into it because Blob sees that blue diagonal, and it's just easy for him to kind of come in. So.
Yeah. Well, that was... What were your thoughts on that, Reborn?
Well, I mean, I got to watch this live as well when it was being recorded, because I believe I was recording one of the perspectives that if I was. But I at least got to spectate from one of these perspectives when this was actually live, and it was interesting it was a lot to follow. Because they both having fought both Blob and Bartender, they both tend to be, at least to me, who's a rather like novice in terms of most techniques, can be rather unpredictable at times with the way that they switch things up a lot. So I get used to them being in one style, and they're playing one way, and all of a sudden they go either completely aggressive or they start putting distance, and it's difficult for me to adapt to it. But seeing them both kind of play this game of, Bartender trying to chase a lot, Blob putting in distance and baiting with those reds in the kind of the middle set of fights, was very interesting to see, because they both use different styles, but they're both switching it up to almost be somewhat unpredictable. But you can also kind of see that they both know each other really well, because a lot of the times when like Bartender's in blue, Blob will switch to yellow just because he kind of already like feels it, and so he'll attempt to deflect those attacks. Yeah,
and I'm just gonna let this roll while we kind of talk about it and summarize it. And is there any, or between the two duelists, did you find any one or the other more interesting than the other, or more? Was there something more noteworthy about one or the other based on your perspective?
Well, I feel like Bartender basically more or less, he had like one, maybe two styles that he was trying to do, where he was chasing a lot of Blob stuff was countered by a lot of chasing from Bartender, where because Blob would try to either put some distance to get some breathing room, get those reds in, whereas Bartender would run in with he would open up the first couple times with the red right, and then kind of just go back into his yellow and blue drags a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And then Blob pulled out a couple aerials during his. So having fought both of them, like I kind of found Blob easier to almost read in a way when I was fighting them personally. But his red aerials are really, really throw me off, whereas Bartender just kind of overwhelms you with a flurry of attacks, and then it just doesn't give you room to breathe, and it's visible here too.
Yeah, bartender's
Where
really evolved in the last 2 or 3 months because his game used to be just totally force fighting, and he started doing base duels a lot more. And so
hmm
there was that flurry of attacks that's kind of always been a present element with him. But the difference now is that it's a lot more wise. It's a lot more technical. So he's not only coming at you with the heavy flurry and all different angles, all different stances, etc. He's doing it from a place of more education and experience with base dueling now, and that makes him very dangerous and also very difficult to read a lot of the time now. He's somebody I want to match like pretty badly, hopefully this weekend. But um, and then Blob is an excellent player in his own right, and I have some footage of him on this channel, and I've dueled him quite a lot. He's an extremely technical player, and I think he,
that was definitely shown here a lot of the times, where he would like with his parries and the deflects, like he has that level of understanding of like the way the system works very well. A lot of the
yeah,
times
like
where he's just kind of blocking them with those the red feint, the red diagonal into the red overhead that we saw.
yep, that's a really good technique, and even bartender who knows it's coming is still falling into it periodically. And
Yeah,
so that speaks volumes to Blob's level of execution. Because the the main play with Blob, or the main play with Bartender, or a player like Bartender, is to sit back, wait for them to, in their flurry of attacks, wait for them to make one attack that you know you can counter really well, and then just go in and go hard. That's kind of my approach with Bartender. With Blob, I actually have to be a much more dynamic duelist because who knows what he's going to pull out of his bag. He's got some of the best techs in his bag just ready to go all the time. And so they're both very challenging players in their own rights, and so this is a lot of fun to watch. And I think we're going to wrap it up there.
yeah. I just have one note that I find interesting
Sure.
is there's a lot of camera yelling that is happening.
Yep.
So a lot of them are extending like the ranges of those sweeps. Bartender does it a lot with the vertical. If somebody's jumping over him, right, to
Yeah.
attempt to extend that range. It's kind of something that I don't tend to like. I see it a lot from these two, but I don't see it like most of the time when I was watching a couple other videos. Like they tend to be at least the yawing isn't as sporadic and wide, whereas here
Hmm.
it's happening because they're like without some of that camera movement, like Blob wouldn't have been able to do that deflect with that red left.
Yeah.
Definitely.
That's a good thing to add, and it shows how important camera movement is in this game because if you yaw enough, you can get a favorable angle or a trade or a deflection where you might not have gotten one before. And
Yeah.
similarly, yawing your camera away so it doesn't deflect on their saber frees up your saber to go in for a next attack too. And so they're both using a lot of camera motion, and I think it's also because they're very familiar with each other's style, and whenever there's that element of more casual gameplay, I think it gives players more of a license to kind of do some kind of showmanship, and so that
hmm
requires getting nasty drags and crazy deflects, and Blob told me it was is kind of like showcasing a bunch of different techs against bartender, and I think that we see some of that with the camera action because the camera action techs are pretty unconventional. They're not easy to pull off. I mean, you have to be a very technical player in order to do them. So, yeah, that was a good ad. We saw a lot of that during this. So, yeah. And I think with that, now I think we're gonna wrap it up. This is a
Yep.
fun one to watch. And
It was
Reborn,
definitely
we would like to have you back some more. Comment on some
well.
more duels.
This is a very educational experience for me as well to actually get to watch and analyze these fights because it helps me see how the techniques look both from the person performing them and also how they look to a person who is your opponent. So it's definitely thank you for having me here. It's been really enjoyable and actually really educational for me in terms of the dueling knowledge that I'm gaining here.
Yeah, and now you have to fight exactly like them the next time we fight in JK2.
All right, sure. Sure.
All right. All right, we're out. Have a great night, everybody. Peace.
Have a great night.